Ethan Hayes stood outside the courthouse in the rain, clutching a custody order that gave him 30 days to prove he could provide for his daughter or lose her forever. He had no job, no savings, and no way out. That's when the black luxury sedan pulled up beside him, and a woman's voice cut through the storm. "Get in. I have a proposition that will change both our lives." What happened next would turn a desperate single father and a ruthless billionaire CEO into something neither of them saw coming, a family that would survive scandal, betrayal, and a corporate war that threatened to destroy everything they built. If you want to see how a contract marriage between two strangers becomes the fight of their lives, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down hard enough to sting. Ethan Hayes stood on the courthouse steps, the custody order folded in his coat pocket, already soaked through. 30 days. That's what the judge had given him. 30 days to find stable employment, secure housing, and prove he wasn't the failure his ex-wife's lawyer had painted him as in front of the entire courtroom. He'd lost count of how many job applications he'd submitted in the past 4 months. 200? 300? The responses were always the same: polite rejections or complete silence. His industry had collapsed during the recession, and middle management types like him were a dime a dozen now. Overqualified for entry-level work, underqualified for executive roles, and too broke to retrain for something new. Ethan walked down the steps slowly, letting the rain soak into his hair and coat. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably another overdue bill notification. He didn't bother checking. What was the point? He was $43 away from overdraft. His car had been repossessed 2 weeks ago, and the studio apartment he was renting month to month had a landlord who was already making noises about eviction. The worst part wasn't the poverty. It was knowing that in 30 days someone would come and take his daughter away. Lily was 6 years old. She still believed her dad could fix anything. She still drew pictures of the two of them holding hands under a sunshine that took up half the page. She still asked him every night if he was okay, because even at 6, she could tell when he was pretending. He thought about calling his brother, but Jonathan had made it clear 3 months ago that he was done lending money. "You need to figure your life out, Ethan. I can't keep bailing you out." Fair enough. Ethan wouldn't have lent himself money either. A car horn snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked up. A black sedan idled at the curb just ahead, sleek and expensive, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in this part of town. The back window rolled down, and a woman's face appeared in the gap. She was young, 30, maybe, with sharp features, dark hair pulled back tight, and eyes that looked like they were used to getting exactly what they wanted. She studied him for a moment, then spoke. "Ethan Hayes?" He froze. Nobody knew him here. He'd come to this courthouse alone, hadn't told anyone except his lawyer where he'd be. "Who's asking?" "Someone who can solve your problem." Her voice was calm, almost clinical. "Get in." Every instinct told him to walk away. Strange woman, expensive car, too convenient, but 30 days wasn't enough time for instincts. 30 days was enough time to drown. He opened the door and slid into the back seat. The interior smelled like leather and something floral he couldn't place. The woman didn't look at him. She was focused on a tablet in her lap, scrolling through what looked like legal documents. "I'm Victoria Laurent," she said without looking up. "I own Laurent Industries. You've probably never heard of it." "I haven't." "Good. That means you're not going to waste my time pretending you understand what I do." She tapped something on the screen, then finally looked at him. Her gaze was unsettling, direct and cold. "I know about your custody situation. I know you have 30 days. I know you're unemployed, broke, and out of options." Ethan's chest tightened. "How do you say—" "I make it my business to know things." She set the tablet aside. "I'm here because we have a mutual problem, and I believe we can solve both with a single arrangement." "I don't understand." Victoria leaned back against the seat, studying him like he was a contract she was considering signing. "My father passed away 8 months ago. He left me control of his company, but with a condition. I need to be married and demonstrate stable family life within 1 year of his death, or the board can vote to transfer leadership to my brother. It's an archaic clause, but it's binding." Ethan stared at her. "You want me to—" "Marry me. 1 year. Strictly business." Her tone didn't change, like she was proposing a lunch meeting. You move into my home with your daughter. We present ourselves as a married couple in public. You attend events with me, play the role convincingly, and in return, I secure full custody of your daughter, pay off your debts, and provide you with a salary and housing for the duration of the contract. The words didn't land right. Ethan felt like he'd walked into the wrong movie. This is insane. This is practical. Victoria pulled a slim folder from the seat beside her and handed it to him. I had my legal team draft a preliminary agreement. You can review it with a lawyer if you choose, though I doubt you can afford one. The terms are simple. 1 year of marriage. Public appearances as needed. Private lives remain separate. At the end of the term, we divorce quietly, and you walk away with enough money to start over. Your daughter gets stability, a good school, and a safe home. You get your life back. Ethan opened the folder. The first page was dense with legal language, but the numbers jumped out. $50,000 upon signing, another $50,000 at 6 months, and a final $100,000 at the end of the year, plus housing, insurance, and an education fund for Lily. His hand shook. Why me? You're not famous. You're not connected to my world. You're desperate enough to say yes, but not unhinged enough to be a liability. And you have a daughter, which makes the arrangement look more authentic. She said it all without a hint of emotion. I don't have time to date, fall in love, and marry someone the traditional way. I need a solution, and you need a lifeline. This benefits both of us. Ethan looked out the window. The rain hadn't let up. People walked past with umbrellas, heads down, going about their normal lives. He thought about Lily, about the custody hearing, about the judge's face when he'd asked Ethan if he had anything to say in his defense. What happens if someone finds out it's fake? They won't. You'll sign an NDA. If you breach it, you forfeit all compensation and face legal consequences. If I breach it, you receive double the agreed amount. My reputation depends on this looking real, so I'll make sure it does. And your brother? He's just going to accept this? Victoria's expression hardened. My brother is a vindictive, entitled man who believes he deserves my father's company because he's male. He'll fight this regardless of whether the marriage is real or not. But if we execute the contract properly, he won't have legal standing to challenge it. Ethan closed the folder. His throat felt dry. I need time to think. You have 30 days to find a job in stable housing, or you lose your daughter. I'm offering you both right now. Victoria's gaze didn't waver. I'm not a kind person, Mr. Hayes. I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm doing this because I need something, and you're the most efficient solution I've found. If you say no, I'll find someone else by tomorrow, but you won't find another offer like this. The silence stretched. Outside, someone honked. A bus hissed to a stop at the corner. If I say yes, Ethan said slowly, what happens to Lily? Does she know this is fake? She's 6. She doesn't need to know anything except that her father is married and providing for her. Children adapt quickly, especially when their circumstances improve. That's not an answer. Victoria's jaw tightened, the first crack in her composure. I'm not interested in harming your daughter, Mr. Hayes, quite the opposite. But I'm also not going to pretend I know how to be a mother figure. I'll provide for her material needs. The emotional labor is yours. And if she gets attached to you, then you'll handle it when the year is over. Ethan looked down at the folder again. The numbers stared back at him. $200,000. A house, a school, custody of Lily, everything he'd lost in the past year, handed back to him on a silver platter. All he had to do was lie. I need 24 hours, he said. Victoria pulled her tablet back into her lap. You have 12. I'll have my driver take you home. If you agree, call the number on the last page of the contract by 9 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't hear from you, I'll assume the answer is no. She tapped the divider between the back seat and the driver. The car started moving. Ethan watched the courthouse disappear behind them, replaced by rain-slicked streets and gray buildings. He felt like he was in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. He wasn't sure which yet. The driver dropped him off in front of his apartment building 20 minutes later. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, clutching the folder, watching the black sedan pull away and vanish into traffic. He walked inside, climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, and unlocked the door to his apartment. Lily was on the couch, coloring. His neighbor, Mrs. Pack, sat in the kitchen drinking tea. She watched Lily after school most days, one of the few people who still helped without asking questions. How'd it go? Mrs. Pack asked quietly. Not great. Ethan set the folder on the counter and crouched down next to Lily. She looked up, her face lighting up the way it always did when he came home. Daddy, look, I drew us at the park. The picture showed two stick figures on swings, both smiling. Ethan kissed the top of her head. It's perfect, sweetheart. Are we going to the park tomorrow? Maybe. We'll see. Lily went back to coloring. Mrs. Pack stood, gathering her coat. You need anything, you let me know. I will. Thanks for watching her. After Mrs. Pack left, Ethan made dinner, boxed mac and cheese, the only thing left in the pantry. Lily ate at the coffee table while watching cartoons. Ethan sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the contract. 1 year of his life, 52 weeks of pretending to be someone's husband, attending events, smiling for cameras, lying to everyone he knew. And at the end of it, what? A pile of money and a daughter who'd spent a year living in a mansion only to be dragged back to reality when it was over? But the alternative was losing her. Watching someone from child services show up at his door and take her away because he couldn't prove he was stable. Visiting her on weekends if he was lucky, watching her grow up in someone else's house, knowing he'd failed her. He picked up his phone and stared at the number on the last page of the contract. Lily called from the couch. Daddy, can we have ice cream? We don't have any, kiddo. Can we get some? Ethan looked at his bank account on his phone. $16. Not tonight. Lily's face fell, but she didn't argue. She never did. That's what killed him. She was 6 years old and already understood that money was tight, that things were hard, that she couldn't ask for too much. He thought about Victoria Laurent's mansion, the education fund, the stability, the lie. He thought about it all night. Lily fell asleep on the couch, and he carried her to the bedroom they shared, tucking her in under the worn comforter. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep, and tried to imagine explaining this to her someday. Daddy married someone so we could keep living together. It wasn't real. I'm sorry. But maybe she'd never have to know. Maybe she'd just remember that things got better. That they moved into a nice house, that she went to a good school, that her dad wasn't stressed and exhausted all the time. At 8:45 the next morning, Ethan called the number. Victoria answered on the second ring. Mr. Hayes, I'll do it. There was a pause. Good. My lawyer will contact you this afternoon with the next steps. We'll arrange the marriage license and ceremony within the week. In the meantime, I'll have movers sent to your apartment. Pack what you need. You'll be staying at my residence starting Friday. That's 3 days from now. I don't see the point in delaying. Do you? Ethan looked around the studio apartment, the peeling paint, the leaking faucet, the stack of overdue bills on the counter. No, I guess not. Then I'll see you Friday evening, 6 p.m. My driver will pick you up. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan set the phone down and stared at the wall. He'd just agreed to marry a stranger, a billionaire, a woman who looked at him like he was a line item on a spreadsheet. He thought about calling his brother, but what would he even say? Hey, Jonathan, I'm marrying a CEO I met yesterday so I can keep custody of Lily. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it. Instead, he started packing. The next 3 days passed in a blur. Ethan told Lily they were moving to a new house because Daddy got a new job. She was excited, which made it easier. Victoria's movers arrived on Thursday and packed everything into a truck in under 2 hours. Ethan watched them work, feeling like he was observing his own life from a distance. On Friday evening, the black sedan pulled up outside the apartment building at exactly 6 p.m. Ethan and Lily climbed into the back seat, and the driver pulled away without a word. Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the city roll past. Where are we going, Daddy? To our new house. Is it big? Think so. Will I have my own room? Ethan's chest tightened. Yes, sweetheart. You'll have your own room. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind and heading into the suburbs. The houses got bigger, the lawns greener. Eventually, the car turned onto a private road lined with trees, and at the end of it sat a mansion that looked like something out of a magazine. Lily's eyes went wide. We're living there? Looks like it. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. The driver opened the door and Ethan stepped out, holding Lily's hand. The front door of the mansion opened and Victoria appeared dressed in a crisp white blouse and dark slacks. She looked at them both, her expression unreadable. "Welcome," she said. "Let's get you settled." She led them inside. The foyer was massive, all marble floors and high ceilings. A chandelier hung overhead, sparkling in the late afternoon light. Lily stared up at it, her mouth open. Victoria's heels clicked against the floor as she walked. "Your rooms are on the second floor, east wing. Lily's room is next to yours. I've had them furnished, but if there's anything you need, let my assistant know." "Where's your room?" Ethan asked. "West wing, opposite side of the house." Of course it was. Victoria showed them upstairs. Lily's room was painted a soft lavender, with a canopy bed, a bookshelf full of new books, and a window overlooking the garden. Lily ran inside, spinning in a circle. "Daddy, look, it's like a princess room." Ethan smiled, despite himself. "It's pretty great, huh?" Victoria stood in the doorway watching. Her expression was still neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been satisfaction. "There's a play area in the backyard," she said, "and a tutor will start Monday to help Lily transition into her new school." "You hired a tutor already?" "I don't do things halfway, Mr. Hayes." She turned and walked down the hall. "Your room is this way." Ethan followed her to a suite at the end of the corridor. It was twice the size of his old apartment, with a king-size bed, a sitting area, and an ensuite bathroom that looked like it belonged in a hotel. "This is a lot," Ethan said. "You'll adjust." Victoria handed him a small binder. "House rules. Meal times, staff schedules, security protocols. Read it tonight. Tomorrow, we'll go over the public appearance schedule and start coordinating our story." "Our story?" "How we met. How long we've been together. Why we're getting married. We need to be consistent." She glanced at her watch. "Dinner is at 7. I'll see you in the dining room." She left before he could respond. Ethan stood in the middle of the suite, holding the binder, feeling like he'd just stepped onto a stage and forgotten all his lines. Lily appeared in the doorway, holding a stuffed animal from her new room. "Daddy, is that lady our family now?" Ethan knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "It's complicated, kiddo, but yeah, something like that." "She seems nice." Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. Dinner was awkward. The dining room had a table long enough to seat 12, but only 3 places were set, 1 at the head and 2 on the side. Victoria sat at the head, Ethan and Lily beside each other. The food was prepared by a chef Ethan hadn't met, served by staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Lily tried to make conversation. "Do you have any pets?" "No," Victoria said. "Do you like animals?" "I'm ambivalent." "What does that mean?" "It means I don't have strong feelings either way." Lily looked at Ethan, confused. He gave her a small smile and changed the subject. "This food is really good." "The chef is experienced," Victoria said. She barely touched her plate, spending most of the meal answering emails on her phone. After dinner, Ethan put Lily to bed in her new room. She was exhausted from the move and fell asleep almost immediately. He stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe, trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. When he went back downstairs, Victoria was in the study, working at a massive desk covered in papers. She didn't look up when he entered. "We need to talk," Ethan said. "About what?" "About how this is going to work. You barely said 2 words to Lily at dinner." Victoria set down her pen. "I told you I'm not a maternal figure, Mr. Hayes. I'm providing for her. That's the extent of my obligation. She's 6. She doesn't understand why some stranger is suddenly in her life." "Then explain it to her." "I can't explain something I don't understand myself." Ethan crossed his arms. "If we're going to sell this to the outside world, you're going to have to try a little harder." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You think I don't know how to act human?" "I think you're used to managing employees, not family." Her jaw tightened. "This is a management situation. We have roles to play. I play the wife. You play the husband. We execute the contract. Emotions are irrelevant." "Except they're not. People don't buy robotic marriages. If you want this to look real, you're going to have to fake some warmth." Victoria stood, walking around the desk to face him. She was shorter than him, but her presence felt larger. "I'm paying you $200,000 to play a part. I suggest you focus on your performance and let me handle mine. And if your performance blows the whole thing, Then we both lose. Her gaze didn't waver. But I don't intend to lose. They stood there for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Ethan stepped back. Fine, but if Lily asks me why you're so cold, I'm not lying to her. I wouldn't expect you to. Victoria returned to her desk. Good night, Mr. Hayes. Ethan left the study, exhausted. He went back to his suite, collapsed onto the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, Lily was asleep in a room that cost more than he'd earned in the past year. Somewhere else, Victoria was working late into the night, alone. He wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if maybe, just maybe, he'd found the only way to survive. The first week felt like living in a museum. Ethan woke every morning in a bed too comfortable, in a room too clean, in a house too quiet. The staff moved through the halls like they were choreographed, appearing exactly when needed and vanishing the moment their tasks were complete. Breakfast was served at 7 sharp, lunch at noon, dinner at 7 in the evening. Everything ran on Victoria's schedule, precise and inflexible. Lily adapted faster than Ethan expected. Kids were good at that, rolling with changes that would break adults. She explored the mansion like it was an adventure, discovering the library, the game room, the indoor pool. She asked Victoria questions constantly, undeterred by the short answers she received. Why do you have so many books if you don't read them? They came with the house. Do you know how to swim? Yes. Can you teach me? The pool instructor starts Wednesday. Victoria answered every question with the same flat efficiency, like she was responding to emails. But Lily didn't seem to notice, or maybe she just didn't care. She kept talking, kept asking, kept trying to crack the surface. Ethan watched it happen from a distance, unsure whether to intervene. Part of him wanted to pull Lily aside and tell her to stop bothering Victoria. Another part of him was curious to see how long it would take before Victoria either softened or snapped. On the 4th day, Victoria's assistant, a sharp woman named Caroline who wore glasses and carried a tablet everywhere, handed Ethan a thick folder over breakfast. Background materials, Caroline said. Miss Laurent wants you to memorize these by tomorrow. Ethan opened the folder. Inside were detailed documents about Victoria's life, her education, her career, her public appearances, even her favorite restaurants. There was a timeline of their fake relationship, complete with dates, locations, and fabricated stories about how they met. We met at a charity gala 2 years ago, Ethan read aloud. I spilled champagne on her dress. She thought I was an idiot. I thought she was the most intimidating woman I'd ever seen. Lily giggled from across the table. Did that really happen? No, sweetheart. It's just a story. Victoria walked into the dining room, already dressed for the day in a charcoal suit. She poured herself coffee from the carafe on the sideboard and glanced at the folder in Ethan's hands. You'll need to sell that story convincingly, she said. We have our first public appearance Saturday night, a fundraiser for the Arts Council. Cameras, journalists, board members, everyone who matters will be there. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. That's 2 days from now. Which is why you need to memorize the materials today. Victoria sat down at the head of the table, scrolling through her phone. Caroline has arranged for a stylist to come by this afternoon. You'll need appropriate clothing. I have a suit. Victoria looked up, her expression making it clear what she thought of his suit. You'll need several, and shoes, and a watch that doesn't look like it came from a cereal box. It was my grandfather's. Then keep it for sentimental purposes, but don't wear it in public. She returned her attention to her phone. Caroline will handle everything. Ethan bit back a response. He reminded himself that this was the deal. Play the part, take the money, keep Lily. Getting offended wouldn't change anything. The stylist arrived at 2. Her name was Morgan, and she had the kind of energy that filled a room. She took one look at Ethan and clapped her hands together. Okay, we're working with good bones here. Tall, decent shoulders, nice jawline. We can absolutely make this work. Make what work? Ethan asked. Make you look like you belong next to Victoria Laurent. Morgan pulled out a tape measure and started taking measurements. Right now, you look like a middle manager at a struggling startup. No offense. None taken. We need to make you look like someone who could credibly marry a billionaire. That means tailored suits, quality fabrics, and accessories that don't scream clearance rack. Lily watched from the couch, fascinated. Are you making my daddy fancy? Morgan grinned. Something like that, kiddo. By the time Morgan finished, Ethan had been measured, photographed, and lectured on the importance of proper shoe care. She promised to have 3 suits delivered by Friday, along with shirts, ties, and shoes that cost more than his rent used to. That evening, Victoria summoned him to the study. She was standing by the window when he entered, looking out at the gardens. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. "We need to practice," she said, without turning around. "Practice what?" "Being married." She finally looked at him. "Sit down." Ethan sat in one of the leather chairs across from her desk. Victoria remained standing, arms crossed. "When we're in public, people will be watching us. How we stand, how we talk, whether we touch. Married couples have a rhythm. We need to develop one, or people will notice the gaps." "You've really thought this through." "I don't do anything halfway." Victoria walked over and stood directly in front of him. "Stand up." He stood. They were close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle. "Put your hand on my waist," she said. Ethan hesitated. "Is that necessary?" "It's what married people do. It's what we'll need to do at the fundraiser. So yes, it's necessary." He placed his hand lightly on her waist, feeling awkward and stiff. Victoria didn't flinch. "You're touching me like I'm made of glass," she said. "It needs to look natural, like you've done it 1,000 times. I've known you for 4 days." "Then pretend you've known me longer." She adjusted his hand, pressing it more firmly against her side. "There. That's better. Now look at me like you're actually interested in what I'm saying." Ethan met her eyes. They were a dark brown, almost black, and they gave nothing away. "This is weird." "This is the job." Victoria stepped back. "We'll practice every evening until Saturday. By then, it needs to feel automatic." They practiced for an hour, standing close, walking together, small touches that were supposed to look affectionate. Victoria corrected him constantly, adjusting his posture, his hand placement, the way he looked at her. "You're too tense," she said. "Relax your shoulders." "I'm standing in a mansion pretending to be married to a stranger. Relaxing isn't exactly easy." "Then fake it better." By the time they finished, Ethan's head was pounding. He went upstairs to check on Lily, who was already asleep in her canopy bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd brought from the old apartment. He sat on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, and wondered how long it would take before this place started feeling normal. The next day, Victoria took them on a tour of the estate. She showed them the tennis courts, the greenhouse, the stables that hadn't been used in years. Lily asked if they could get a horse. Victoria said no. Lily asked if they could at least get a dog. Victoria said she'd think about it. "That's not a no," Lily whispered to Ethan. "Don't get your hopes up, kiddo." They had lunch by the pool, sandwiches prepared by the chef, served on plates that probably cost more than Ethan's car used to. Victoria sat across from them, still working on her tablet, barely eating. "Do you ever stop working?" Ethan asked. "No." Victoria didn't look up. "That doesn't sound healthy." "I'm not interested in being healthy. I'm interested in being successful." "Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Victoria finally set the tablet down, her gaze sharp. "You've been here less than a week, Mr. Hayes. I don't need lifestyle advice from someone who couldn't keep a job for 4 months. The words landed like a slap. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Across the table, Lily had gone quiet, sensing the tension. "Fair enough," Ethan said evenly. "But for the record, the reason I couldn't keep a job is because my entire industry collapsed. Not because I wasn't trying." Victoria's expression didn't change. "I'm aware. I read your file." "Then maybe don't act like I'm lazy." They stared at each other across the table. Finally, Victoria picked up her tablet again. "The suits will be delivered this afternoon. Make sure they fit. If they don't, Caroline will arrange alterations." She stood and walked back into the house without another word. Lily looked at Ethan, her eyes wide. "Is she always like that?" "I think so, yeah." "She's kind of mean." "She's—" Ethan paused, searching for the right word. "Complicated." That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan found Victoria in the library. She was sitting in one of the high-backed chairs reading a file, a glass of wine on the side table next to her. She glanced up when he entered. "If you're here to continue the argument from lunch, save it. I'm not interested." "I'm not here to argue." Ethan sat down across from her. I'm here because if we're going to do this for a year, we need to figure out how to coexist without tearing each other apart. Victoria closed the file. I'm not interested in coexisting. I'm interested in fulfilling a contract. Those are the same thing in this situation. She took a sip of wine, studying him. You don't like me. I don't know you well enough to like or dislike you. But you don't like how I treat your daughter. Ethan leaned forward. Lily's trying. She's a kid in a strange place and she's doing her best to adjust. It wouldn't kill you to meet her halfway. I'm housing her, feeding her, paying for her education. What more do you want? I want you to talk to her like she's a person, not an inconvenience. Victoria's jaw tightened. I told you from the beginning that I'm not maternal. I don't know how to be. I never had a good example. What does that mean? She looked away, her gaze drifting to the fireplace. For a moment, Ethan thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. My mother died when I was 8. Cancer. My father buried himself in work after that. My brother and I were raised by nannies and tutors. We had everything we needed materially, but emotionally? She shook her head. We were on our own. Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd assumed Victoria's coldness was just her personality, something she'd chosen. He hadn't considered it might be something she'd learned. I'm sorry, he said finally. Don't be. It made me who I am. Victoria finished her wine and set the glass down. I built an empire because I learned early that the only person you can rely on is yourself. Emotions are liabilities, attachments are weaknesses. I survived by keeping everything at arm's length. That sounds lonely. It's practical. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I don't expect you to understand, Mr. Hayes. You wear your heart on your sleeve. You're the kind of person who makes decisions based on feelings. I make them based on logic. That's why you were unemployed and desperate, and I'm a billionaire. The words stung, but Ethan forced himself to stay calm. You're right. I do make decisions based on feelings. That's why I'm here. Because I love my daughter more than I care about my pride. But feelings aren't a weakness. They're what make us human. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Then she walked past him toward the door. The fundraiser is tomorrow night, she said. Be ready by 6. She left. Ethan sat alone in the library, staring at the fire, wondering if this woman was capable of change, or if he'd just signed up to spend a year with someone who'd never let him in. Saturday arrived faster than Ethan wanted. The suits Morgan had delivered fit perfectly, which was both impressive and slightly unsettling. He stood in front of the mirror in his room, adjusting the tie for the 3rd time, feeling like he was putting on a costume. Lily knocked on the door and peeked inside. Daddy, you look really fancy. Thanks, sweetheart. Are you nervous? A little. You'll do great. You always do. She gave him a hug, then ran back to her room where the nanny Victoria had hired was setting up a movie. At 6 sharp, Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs. Ethan looked up and felt his breath catch. She was wearing a floor-length black gown that was somehow both elegant and severe, her hair pulled back in a way that made her cheekbones look even sharper. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. You clean up well, she said, descending the stairs. So do you. She stopped in front of him, adjusting his tie with the same clinical efficiency she applied to everything. Remember the story we met 2 years ago. You were charming despite the champagne incident. I was skeptical but intrigued. We started dating 6 months later. You proposed last Christmas. Keep it simple. Don't over-explain. Got it. And if anyone asks about Lily, she's your daughter from a previous relationship. I've accepted her as part of our family. No one needs details beyond that. Understood. Victoria studied him for a moment, then nodded. Let's go. The fundraiser was held at a downtown hotel, in a ballroom that looked like something from a period drama. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, tables draped in white linen. People in expensive clothing stood in clusters, holding champagne glasses and speaking in the kind of low, controlled tones that signaled power and money. Ethan felt out of place immediately. Victoria, on the other hand, moved through the room like she owned it. She greeted people by name, smiled at the right moments, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She was performing, Ethan realized. Every word, every gesture, carefully calculated. She introduced him to dozens of people, board members, investors, politicians. Ethan shook hands, smiled, repeated the story about the champagne incident so many times it started to feel real. Everyone seemed to buy it, or at least no one called them out. They were standing by the bar when a man approached. He was tall, around Victoria's age, with the same sharp features and cold eyes. Ethan knew who he was before Victoria even spoke. "Marcus," Victoria said evenly. "Victoria." Marcus's gaze slid to Ethan. "So, this is the husband. I heard rumors, but I had to see it for myself." "Marcus is my brother," Victoria said, her tone making it clear she wasn't thrilled about it. Marcus extended a hand. Ethan shook it. The grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Ethan Hayes," Marcus said. "I did some research. Middle management type, recently unemployed, no family money, no connections. Quite the catch for my sister." "Marcus?" Victoria's voice was sharp. "Don't." "I'm just curious." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How exactly did you two meet?" "Charity gala," Ethan said. 2 years ago. I spilled champagne on her dress." "How romantic." Marcus took a sip of his drink. "And you're not at all interested in her money, I assume." "Marcus, enough," Victoria said. "I'm just asking the questions everyone's thinking." Marcus looked back at Ethan. "My sister is one of the wealthiest women in the country. You're a broke single dad. The math doesn't add up." Ethan felt his temper rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. "The math is none of your business. It is when it affects the company my father built." "Your father left the company to me," Victoria said coldly. "Not you. Accept it and move on." Marcus's expression darkened. "We'll see how long that lasts." He walked away. Victoria exhaled slowly, her composure cracking for just a second. Then she turned to Ethan. "Ignore him. He's been insufferable since the day I was born." "He really thinks this is fake? He thinks everything I do is calculated, which, to be fair, it usually is." Victoria glanced around the room. "Come on, there are more people we need to talk to." They spent the next 2 hours working the room. Ethan fell into a rhythm, playing his part, laughing at the right moments, touching Victoria's waist when it seemed natural. He could feel people watching them, evaluating, judging. By the time the night ended, his face hurt from smiling. On the drive home, Victoria was quiet. Ethan sat beside her in the back seat, loosening his tie, feeling drained. "You did well tonight," Victoria said finally. "Thanks." "Marcus will keep digging. He's not going to let this go." "What can he actually do?" Victoria stared out the window. "If he can prove the marriage is a sham, he can challenge my father's will, take the company to court, tie everything up in legal battles for years." She looked at him. "That's why we can't slip. Not once." "We won't." "You sound confident." "I'm good at pretending," Ethan said. "I've been doing it for months." Victoria's gaze lingered on him, something unreadable in her expression. Then she looked away. When they got home, Lily was asleep. Ethan checked on her, kissed her forehead, then went to his room. He was about to turn off the light when he heard a soft knock on the door. Victoria stood in the hallway, still in her gown, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. "I thought you might need this," she said. Ethan took one of the glasses. "Thanks." She didn't leave. Instead, she leaned against the doorframe, sipping her drink. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "Depends on the question." "Why are you really doing this? I know about the will, but there has to be more to it. You could have found someone else. Someone from your world." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "Because everyone from my world would have wanted something. An investor would have used the marriage to leverage business deals. A socialite would have used it for publicity. But you?" She met his eyes. "You just wanted to keep your daughter. That's something I can respect." "That's it?" "That's enough." She finished her drink and set the glass on the hallway table. "Good night, Mr. Hayes." "Good night." She walked away, disappearing into the west wing. Ethan closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, turning her words over in his mind. Maybe Victoria Laurent wasn't as cold as she pretended to be. Or maybe he was just desperate to believe that. The days blurred together after that. Ethan and Lily settled into the rhythm of the house. Breakfast at 7. Lily's tutoring sessions in the morning. Lunch by the pool. Afternoons exploring the estate or reading in the library. Dinners with Victoria, who was still distant but slightly less sharp than before. Ethan noticed small changes. Victoria started asking Lily questions at dinner, nothing deep, but more than the yes or no responses she'd given before. She inquired about the tutoring, about the books Lily was reading, about whether the chef was making food she liked. One evening, Lily asked Victoria to read her a bedtime story. Ethan expected Victoria to refuse. Instead, she paused, then nodded. "One story," Victoria said. "Then you sleep." Ethan watched from the doorway as Victoria sat on the edge of Lily's bed, reading from a picture book about a dragon who didn't want to breathe fire. Her voice was still formal, still controlled, but there was something gentler in it. Lily listened with wide eyes, completely absorbed. When the story ended, Lily yawned. "Can you read another one tomorrow?" Victoria hesitated. "We'll see." "That's not a no," Lily said, grinning. A flicker of something crossed Victoria's face. Maybe amusement, maybe surprise. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Good night, Lily." "Good night, Victoria." Victoria left the room, brushing past Ethan in the hallway. He followed her downstairs. "You didn't have to do that," he said. She asked. "Still, thank you." Victoria stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at him. "Don't read too much into it, Mr. Hayes. It was one bedtime story." "I know, but it's a start." Something shifted in her expression, too quick to name. Then she turned and walked toward her study, leaving Ethan standing in the foyer, feeling like maybe, just maybe, the walls were starting to crack. Over the next few weeks, the cracks widened. Victoria started joining them for breakfast instead of eating alone in her office. She asked Lily about her day. She even smiled once when Lily made a joke about the chef's obsession with garnishing everything with parsley. Ethan watched it happen, fascinated and cautious. He didn't push. He didn't comment. He just let it unfold. One Saturday afternoon, Lily convinced Victoria to come to the garden with her. They picked flowers together, Lily chattering nonstop, Victoria listening quietly, occasionally offering a response. Ethan watched from the patio, a book open in his lap, not really reading. When they came back inside, Lily ran upstairs to put the flowers in a vase. Victoria sat down across from Ethan, brushing dirt from her hands. "She has a lot of energy," Victoria said. "Always has." "Does she ever stop talking?" Ethan smiled. "Not really." Victoria leaned back in her chair, looking tired but not annoyed. "I don't know how you do it. You get used to it." "I'm not sure I will." "You're doing better than you think." Victoria glanced at him, then away. "I'm trying. It's harder than I expected." "What is?" "Letting someone in." She said it quietly, almost like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. Then she stood, brushing off her pants. "I need to get back to work." She left before Ethan could respond. He sat there for a long time, staring at the garden, thinking about the woman who was slowly becoming less of a stranger. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan found Victoria in the library again. She was sitting by the fire, a file open on her lap, but she wasn't reading it. She was just staring into the flames. "Can I sit?" Ethan asked. She nodded. He sat down across from her, the fire crackling between them. "You've been different lately," he said. "Different how?" "Less," he searched for the word. "Guarded." Victoria closed the file and set it aside. Lily's persistent. It's hard to stay guarded around someone who asks 40 questions before breakfast. Ethan smiled. "She's good at that." "She reminds me of someone." Victoria's voice was soft. "My sister." Ethan went still. "I didn't know you had a sister." "I don't. Not anymore." Victoria's gaze stayed on the fire. "She died when she was 7. Car accident. I was 12. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." Victoria's jaw tightened. "But being around Lily, it brings things back. The way she talks, the way she looks at the world like it's full of possibilities. That's how Emma was." Ethan didn't know what to say. He just sat there, letting the silence stretch. "After Emma died," Victoria continued, "my father shut down completely. He threw himself into work, and I followed his example. I thought if I could be successful enough, strong enough, it would make up for losing her. But it didn't. It just made me—" She trailed off. "Lonely," Ethan finished. Victoria looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Yes." They sat together in the quiet, the fire burning low. Finally, Victoria stood. "I should get some sleep." "Victoria," Ethan said. She paused. "Thank you for telling me that." She nodded, then left. Ethan stayed by the fire for a while longer, thinking about the little girl Victoria had lost and the woman she'd become because of it. The next morning, everything felt different. Victoria came down to breakfast and actually ate. She asked Lily about her plans for the day. She even suggested they all go to the botanical gardens in the afternoon, if Ethan was interested. "Really?" Lily's face lit up. "If your father agrees," Victoria said, glancing at Ethan. "Yeah," Ethan said, caught off guard. "That sounds great." They went. The botanical gardens were massive, full of winding paths and hidden alcoves. Lily ran ahead, stopping to look at every flower, every fountain, every butterfly. Victoria walked beside Ethan, her hands in her pockets, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "This is nice," Ethan said. "It is." "You should do this more often. Take a break. Enjoy things." Victoria smiled, a real smile, small but genuine. "Maybe I will." They found Lily near the koi pond, trying to convince a fish to come to the surface. Victoria crouched down beside her, pointing out the different colors of the fish, explaining their patterns. Lily listened, mesmerized. Ethan stood back, watching them, and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. But somewhere in the past few weeks, the lines had started to blur. Victoria wasn't just the woman paying him to play a role anymore. She was becoming someone real, someone complicated and damaged and trying, in her own awkward way, to be better. And Ethan was starting to care about her. That realization scared him more than anything else, because in 10 months this would all end. The contract would expire. They'd go their separate ways, and Lily, who was already getting attached, would lose another person she'd started to love. Ethan pushed the thought away. He couldn't think about that now. He had to focus on the present, on keeping Lily safe, on playing the part he'd agreed to play. But as he watched Victoria laugh at something Lily said, he couldn't shake the feeling that this fake marriage was starting to become something neither of them had planned for, and he had no idea what to do about it. 3 months into the arrangement, Ethan woke up one morning and realized he'd stopped counting the days until it ended. That should have been a warning sign, but he ignored it. Life in the mansion had found its rhythm, and fighting against it felt pointless. Victoria still worked too much, Lily still asked too many questions, and Ethan still felt like he was playing a character in someone else's story. But the edges had softened. The house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a place where people actually lived. Victoria had started eating dinner with them every night instead of 3 times a week. She'd even initiated conversations, asking Ethan about his day, about the books he was reading, about whether he'd thought about what he wanted to do after the year ended. That last question always made him uncomfortable, so he deflected. She never pushed. They had another fundraiser coming up, this one bigger than the last. A gala for cancer research, hosted at the Natural History Museum. Victoria spent days preparing, reviewing guest lists, coordinating with her PR team, making sure every detail was perfect. She was nervous, though she'd never admit it. Ethan could tell by the way she checked her phone more often, by the tension in her shoulders when she thought no one was looking. The night before the gala, they practiced again. Standing close, moving together, all the small touches that were supposed to signal intimacy. But something had changed since the first time they'd done this. The awkwardness was gone. When Ethan put his hand on Victoria's waist now, it didn't feel forced. When she leaned into him, it felt natural. "Better?" Victoria said, stepping back. "You've gotten comfortable." "So have you." She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "Maybe too comfortable." "What does that mean?" Victoria turned away, walking toward the window. "It means we need to remember what this is. A contract. A performance. The moment we forget that, we're in trouble." "Are you worried we're forgetting?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I'm worried about what happens when Lily asks why we're getting divorced. Because she will ask, Ethan, and I don't know what we're going to tell her." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He'd been avoiding that thought for weeks, but Victoria had just dragged it into the open. We'll figure it out when the time comes. That's not a plan. Neither is worrying about it now. He crossed the room, standing beside her at the window. Outside, the garden lights cast soft shadows across the lawn. Lily's happy, you're happy, or at least happier than you were. Why can't we just let that be enough for now? Victoria looked at him, and for a moment he saw something vulnerable in her eyes. Then she blinked, and it was gone. Because I don't do happy, Ethan. I do successful, and the moment I start confusing the two, I lose control. Maybe losing control isn't the worst thing. It is for me. She walked past him toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long night. The gala was everything Victoria had promised, extravagant, crowded, and exhausting. The museum had been transformed into something out of a dream, with string lights and ice sculptures and enough champagne to float a yacht. Ethan wore one of his new suits, the navy one Morgan had insisted made his eyes look better. Victoria wore emerald green, a dress that turned heads the moment they walked in. They played their parts, smiling, laughing, standing just close enough to look like they belonged together. Ethan told the champagne story so many times he could recite it in his sleep. People seemed to believe it, or maybe they just didn't care enough to dig deeper. Marcus was there, of course. He watched them from across the room, his expression calculating. Ethan tried to ignore him, but it was hard. Every time he looked up, Marcus was there, studying them like he was waiting for them to slip. Halfway through the night, Victoria was pulled into a conversation with a group of board members. Ethan excused himself and went to the bar, ordering a whiskey he didn't really want. He was standing there, watching the crowd, when someone sat down beside him. "You're doing a good job," a woman's voice said. Ethan turned. She was around Victoria's age, blonde, wearing a silver dress that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Ethan asked. "Natalie Chen. I sit on the board of Laurent Industries." She gestured to the bartender for a drink. "I've been watching you and Victoria all night. Very convincing." "Thanks, I think." Natalie's smile widened. "You think? That's cute." She took her drink from the bartender. "Tell me, mister. Hayes, what's it like being married to the Ice Queen?" Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "I wouldn't know. My wife isn't an Ice Queen." "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, she's exactly that. Cold, calculating, incapable of genuine emotion. Her father was the same way. Brilliant, but hollow." "You didn't know her father." "I worked with him for 10 years. Trust me, I knew him." Natalie sipped her drink. "Victoria's cut from the same cloth. She'll use you until she doesn't need you anymore, and then she'll discard you without a second thought. That's how people like her operate." Ethan set his glass down, turning to face her fully. "People like her?" "People who care more about power than people." Natalie's expression hardened. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Mr. Hayes. I'm trying to give you a warning. Whatever you think you have with Victoria, it's not real. She's incapable of that." "You're wrong." "Am I?" Natalie stood, smoothing her dress. "Then good luck. You're going to need it." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan stayed at the bar, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to believe Natalie was wrong, that she was just bitter or jealous or both. But her words had landed in a place he'd been trying to ignore. The part of him that wondered if Victoria was capable of caring about anything beyond her company. He found Victoria near the dinosaur exhibit, surrounded by donors. She was in full CEO mode, charming and confident, making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. When she saw Ethan, she excused herself and walked over. "You okay?" she asked. "You look tense." "I'm fine." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Instead, she slipped her hand into his, the gesture smooth and practiced. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate, but Ethan could feel the calculation behind it. "We need to make the rounds," Victoria said. "There are a few more people I need to talk to." They spent the next hour circulating through the room. Ethan smiled, shook hands, nodded at conversations he wasn't really hearing. His mind kept going back to Natalie's words. "She'll use you until she doesn't need you anymore." By the time they got back to the mansion, Ethan's head was pounding. Lily was already asleep, the nanny having put her to bed hours ago. Victoria kicked off her heels in the foyer, sighing. "That went well," she said. "Better than I expected." "Yeah, great." Victoria looked at him, frowning. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." "Ethan, you've been off since the bar. What happened?" He hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "I talked to Natalie Chen." Victoria's expression darkened. "What did she say?" "That you're cold, calculating. That you'll use me until you don't need me anymore, and then throw me away." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Of course she did. Natalie's hated me since the day I took over the company. She thought she'd be next in line, but my father chose me instead. She's never forgiven me for it." "So she's wrong?" "About what?" "About you being incapable of caring about anything except power." Victoria's face went still. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. 3 months ago, this was simple, a contract, a business deal, but now Lily's attached to you. He stopped himself. "You're what?" Ethan looked at her, feeling exposed in a way he hated. "I'm starting to care about you. And I don't know if that's real or if I'm just fooling myself because it's easier than remembering this is all temporary." Victoria stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "You want to know if I'm capable of caring?" she said quietly. "The truth is, I don't know. I've spent so long keeping people at a distance that I'm not sure I remember how to let them in. But Lily," her voice caught, "Lily's gotten under my skin, and you," she looked away, "you make me want to try, which terrifies me because trying means risking something I've never been willing to risk before." "What's that?" "Getting hurt." She met his eyes again. "I lost everyone I ever loved, Ethan. My mother, my sister, eventually my father. I learned to stop loving because it was the only way to survive. But being around you and Lily, it's making me forget why I built those walls in the first place." Ethan felt his heart hammering in his chest. "Victoria." She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't part of the performance. It was messy and desperate and completely real. Ethan froze for half a second, then kissed her back, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Victoria looked stunned, like she couldn't believe what she'd just done. "That was a mistake," she whispered. "Was it?" "Yes." "No, I don't know." She stepped back, putting distance between them. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "But it did." Victoria pressed her hands to her face. "We can't do this. The contract says—" "I don't care what the contract says." "Well, I do." She dropped her hands, her expression hardening. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. We're blurring the lines, and when everything falls apart, Lily's going to be the one who gets hurt. Or maybe nothing has to fall apart." Ethan moved closer. "Maybe we stop pretending this is just business and admit it's become something else." "And then what? We live happily ever after?" Victoria shook her head. "That's not how the real world works, Ethan. You said it yourself. I'm cold and calculating. I'm not built for the kind of life you want." "You're not as cold as you think you are." "Yes, I am." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to be anything else." They stood there in the foyer, the silence heavy between them. Finally, Victoria turned and walked toward the stairs. "Good night, Ethan." "Victoria, wait. Please don't make this harder than it already is." She disappeared up the stairs, leaving Ethan alone in the foyer, his heart still racing, his mind spinning. He'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross, and he had no idea what came next. The next morning, Victoria was gone before breakfast. Caroline said she'd left early for a meeting, but Ethan suspected she was avoiding him. He spent the day with Lily, trying to act normal, trying not to think about the kiss. But Lily noticed something was off. "Is Victoria mad at you?" "Why would you think that?" "She always eats breakfast with us, and you look sad." Ethan forced a smile. "I'm not sad, kiddo, just tired." Lily didn't look convinced, but she let it go. They spent the afternoon in the garden, Lily chasing butterflies while Ethan sat on the patio, staring at nothing. Victoria didn't come home for dinner. or the next night, or the night after that. Caroline said she was staying at the company penthouse downtown, dealing with back-to-back meetings. Ethan knew it was an excuse. She was avoiding him. By the fourth day, Lily started asking when Victoria was coming back. Ethan didn't have a good answer. He called Victoria twice, but both calls went to voicemail. He texted her. No response. On the fifth day, Marcus showed up at the house. Ethan answered the door, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Marcus smiled, but it was cold. "I came to talk to you. May I come in?" Every instinct told Ethan to say no, but refusing seemed worse, so he stepped aside. Marcus walked into the foyer, looking around like he was cataloging everything he saw. "Nice place," Marcus said. "I grew up here, you know, before Victoria kicked me out." "She didn't kick you out. Your father left the house to her." "Because she manipulated him." Marcus turned to face Ethan. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want to offer you something." "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard the offer yet." Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket and held it out. Inside is a check for $500,000. All you have to do is admit the marriage is fake, and it's yours. Ethan stared at the envelope. "You're trying to bribe me. I'm trying to give you a way out. You're in over your head, Mr. Hayes. Victoria's using you to secure her position at the company, and the moment she doesn't need you anymore, you're gone. Take the money. Walk away. Start over." "I'm not interested." Marcus's smile faded. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Ethan walked to the door and opened it. "Get out." Marcus didn't move. "I'm going to destroy her, you know. One way or another, I'm going to take that company from her. And when I do, you're going to wish you'd taken my offer. Out, now." Marcus left, but not before giving Ethan one last calculating look. The moment the door closed, Ethan's hand started shaking. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. This time she answered. "Ethan, I can't talk right now. Your brother just showed up at the house. He tried to bribe me to say the marriage is fake." There was a long silence. Then Victoria's voice came through, tight and controlled. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to leave." Another pause. "I'm coming home. Don't talk to him again. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be there in an hour." She hung up. Ethan stood in the foyer, his mind racing. Marcus was escalating, which meant things were about to get a lot worse. Victoria arrived exactly an hour later, walking through the door like she was heading into battle. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair slightly disheveled. She dropped her bag on the console table and turned to Ethan. "Tell me everything he said." Ethan repeated the conversation. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every word. "He's desperate," she said when Ethan finished. "The board meets in 2 weeks to review my position. If he can prove the marriage is fraudulent before then, he can challenge my authority. Can he prove it?" "Not unless one of us admits it." Victoria looked at him. "Which is why I need to know. Are you having second thoughts?" "About what?" "About this. About us." She gestured between them. "About what happened the other night." Ethan took a step closer. "I'm not having second thoughts. You should be. This is getting messy, complicated." "It's been complicated since the beginning." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're right, but I thought I could control it. I thought I could keep everything separate, business, personal, emotions. I was wrong. So what do we do now?" She looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Fear. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But Marcus isn't going to stop. He's going to dig into every aspect of our lives, looking for cracks. And if he finds them, he won't. You don't know that." "Then we make sure he doesn't." Ethan closed the distance between them. "Victoria, I meant what I said the other night. I care about you. I'm not walking away. Even if it means getting dragged through the mud? Because that's what Marcus will do. He'll paint you as a gold digger. He'll twist everything until people believe you're the villain." "Let him try." Ethan reached for her hand. "I'm not afraid of your brother." Victoria looked down at their joined hands, her expression softening. "You should be. He's ruthless." "So are you." She smiled, a real smile this time. Fair point. They stood there in the foyer, holding hands, and for a moment the world outside didn't exist. Then Lily's voice called from upstairs. Daddy, is Victoria home? Victoria looked up and something shifted in her face. I should go say hi. She's missed you. I've missed her too. Victoria squeezed his hand, then let go and walked toward the stairs. Halfway up, she paused and looked back. Thank you for not taking Marcus's money. I wasn't tempted. I know. That's why I'm thanking you. She disappeared upstairs and Ethan stood alone in the foyer, feeling like they'd just crossed another line. But this time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like the first honest thing they'd done since this whole arrangement started. The next 2 weeks were a hurricane. Marcus went public with his suspicions, giving an interview to a financial news outlet where he claimed Victoria had entered into a fraudulent marriage to manipulate their father's will. The story exploded. Suddenly, reporters were camped outside the mansion gates, photographers following them everywhere, headlines screaming about the billionaire's fake marriage scandal. Victoria handled it the way she handled everything, with cold, ruthless efficiency. She hired a PR firm, released a statement calling Marcus's accusations baseless, and threatened legal action if he continued spreading lies. But the damage was done. The board scheduled an emergency meeting to investigate the claims. Ethan and Victoria had to sit through depositions, answer questions from lawyers, provide evidence that their relationship was real. They showed photos from the past few months, dinners together, trips to the botanical gardens, moments with Lily. They brought in character witnesses, friends who testified that they seemed genuinely happy together. But Marcus had evidence too. He'd hired investigators who dug up Ethan's financial records, showing how desperate he'd been before the marriage. He presented the timeline, pointing out how convenient it was that Victoria got married just in time to satisfy her father's will. The worst part was watching Lily try to understand what was happening. She saw the reporters outside, heard the whispers from staff, and knew something was wrong even if she didn't understand the details. One night, she climbed into Ethan's bed, her eyes red from crying. Why are people saying mean things about you and Victoria? Ethan pulled her close. Because sometimes people don't understand something, so they make up stories. But you and Victoria love each other, right? The question hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He thought about lying, about giving her the simple answer she wanted, but he couldn't. It's complicated, sweetheart. That's what adults always say when they don't want to tell the truth. Lily looked up at him. Do you love her? Ethan stared at the ceiling, his throat tight. Yeah, kiddo, I think I do. Then why don't you just tell her? Because sometimes love isn't enough. Lily frowned, processing that. Then she snuggled closer. I think it should be. Ethan kissed the top of her head, wishing the world was as simple as a 6-year-old saw it. The board meeting arrived like a storm. Victoria left the house at dawn, dressed in her sharpest suit, her armor back in place. Ethan wanted to go with her, but she'd insisted he stay home with Lily. This is my fight, she'd said. I need to handle it alone. He spent the entire day pacing, checking his phone, trying to distract Lily with movies and games. But he couldn't focus. All he could think about was Victoria, standing in front of a room full of people who wanted to tear her down. She came home just after 8. Ethan was waiting in the foyer when she walked through the door. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. What happened? He asked. Victoria set her briefcase down slowly. They ruled in my favor, barely. Marcus couldn't provide concrete proof the marriage was fraudulent, and our evidence was strong enough to create reasonable doubt. The board voted to keep me as CEO. That's good news. Is it? Victoria's voice was hollow. Because it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like I just survived the first round of a fight that's never going to end. Ethan crossed the foyer and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then melted against him, her face pressed into his shoulder. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm tired of fighting, tired of pretending, tired of being alone. You're not alone. Aren't I? She pulled back, looking at him with red-rimmed eyes. In 9 months, this ends. You leave, Lily leaves, and I go back to being exactly what I was before. Alone in this house, married to my company, with nothing else. That doesn't have to happen. Yes, it does. That's the contract. Then we change the contract. Victoria shook her head. We can't. Why not? Because I'm terrified, Ethan. Her voice broke. I'm terrified that if I let myself believe this is real, it'll be ripped away like everything else I've ever loved. And I don't think I can survive that again. Ethan cupped her face in his hands. Then let me be terrified with you. He kissed her, and this time she didn't pull away. She kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. They stood in the foyer, holding each other, the world outside forgotten. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was crying. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. She nodded, wiping her tears. Okay. Okay? Okay. She took a shaky breath. No more pretending. No more contracts. We do this for real, or we don't do it at all. Ethan smiled. For real. They stood there in the quiet house, holding hands, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Ethan felt like they were finally on solid ground. But outside the gates, Marcus sat in his car, watching the house through the darkness, his expression cold and calculating. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning after the board meeting, Victoria woke up in Ethan's bed. Not because anything had happened between them. They'd fallen asleep talking, both too exhausted to move. But because for the first time in years, she hadn't wanted to be alone. Ethan was already awake, sitting against the headboard, scrolling through his phone with a frown that made her stomach tighten. What's wrong? She asked, her voice rough from sleep. He turned the phone toward her. The headline screamed in bold letters, Billionaire, CEO's marriage under investigation, fraud or love story. Victoria sat up, taking the phone from him. The article was brutal. It detailed Marcus's accusations, quoted anonymous sources claiming the marriage was a business arrangement, and included photos of Ethan from before the wedding, looking haggard, desperate, broken. The contrast with recent photos of him in expensive suits at her side was damning. They're calling me a con artist, Ethan said quietly. They're saying I manipulated you for money. Victoria scrolled through the article, her jaw clenched. Marcus leaked this. He's trying to turn public opinion against us before the next board meeting. When's the next meeting? 2 months. But if the media circus gets bad enough, they can call an emergency session earlier. She handed the phone back. He's not playing by the rules anymore. He's going for total destruction. So what do we do? Victoria climbed out of bed, pacing to the window. Outside, the reporters had multiplied overnight. At least a dozen vans lined the street beyond the gates, cameras pointed at the house like weapons. We fight back, publicly. How? She turned to face him. We tell the truth. Not the sanitized PR version, the real story. How we met, why we married, how it changed. She paused. How we fell in love. Ethan stared at her. You want to go public with everything? Not everything, but enough to show that what we have now is real. The board ruled in my favor because they couldn't prove the marriage was fake. But if we admit it started as a business arrangement and became genuine, it changes the narrative. We control the story instead of letting Marcus control it. That's risky. Everything about this has been risky. Victoria crossed her arms. But I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. If we're going to do this for real, then let's actually do it. No more half-truths. Ethan stood up, walking over to her. You're sure about this? No, but I'm sure about you. She reached for his hand. And I'm sure I'm not letting Marcus take this from us. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Victoria's PR team was horrified by the idea of admitting the marriage had started as a contract, but she overruled them. She hired a different publicist, someone known for crisis management and brutal honesty. Together, they crafted a statement that walked the razor-thin line between confession and justification. The interview was scheduled for Sunday evening on a primetime news program. Victoria insisted Ethan do it with her. He resisted at first. This was her world, her company, her fight. But she was adamant. This isn't just about me anymore, she said. It's about us. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. So Ethan agreed. They practiced with the publicist, rehearsing answers to the questions they knew were coming. How did you meet? Why did you get married? When did it become real? Every question felt like walking through a minefield. Lily knew something big was happening. She'd heard them talking in hushed voices, seen the stress etched into both their faces. The night before the interview, she climbed into Victoria's lap during dinner, something she rarely did anymore now that she was getting older. Are you and Daddy going to be okay? Lily asked. Victoria looked at Ethan across the table, then back at Lily. We're going to try very hard to be. What if people are still mean? Then we'll deal with it. Victoria tucked a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. But whatever happens, you're safe. You understand that, right? This doesn't change how much your dad loves you, or how much I... She stopped, the words catching in her throat. How much you what? Lily prompted. Victoria took a breath. How much I care about you. Lily studied her face, serious and searching. Then she wrapped her arms around Victoria's neck. I love you too. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Ethan helplessly, and he saw his own emotions reflected back at him. They'd tried so hard to keep Lily from getting hurt, but it was too late. She was already invested, already loved Victoria like she was family, which meant if this fell apart, all three of them would be destroyed. The interview took place in a downtown studio in front of a live audience. Victoria and Ethan sat on a couch across from the host, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who had a reputation for asking the questions no one else would. The studio lights were blinding. Ethan's hands were sweating. Victoria sat perfectly still beside him, her expression calm, but he could feel the tension radiating off her. Patricia started with softballs. How did you meet? What attracted you to each other? Ethan told the champagne story, and Victoria smiled at all the right moments. The audience seemed charmed. Then Patricia leaned forward, and Ethan knew the real interview was about to begin. Victoria, there are allegations that your marriage to Ethan is fraudulent, that it was arranged to satisfy the terms of your father's will. What do you say to that? Victoria didn't hesitate. The allegations are partially true. The audience gasped. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. Beside Victoria, Ethan felt his heart hammering, but he kept his expression neutral. Partially true? Patricia repeated. Can you elaborate? When Ethan and I got married, it was a business arrangement, Victoria said, her voice steady. My father's will required me to be married within a year of his death to maintain control of the company. Ethan was facing a custody battle and needed financial stability. We entered into a contract marriage that benefited both of us. Patricia turned to Ethan. And you agreed to this? To marry someone you barely knew for money? Ethan met her gaze. I agreed to it because I was desperate. I'd lost my job, I had no savings, and I was 30 days away from losing custody of my daughter. Victoria offered me a way out. I took it. So, Marcus Laurent's accusations are correct. The marriage was fake. It started that way, Victoria said, but it didn't stay that way. What changed? Victoria glanced at Ethan, and he saw vulnerability in her eyes. Everything changed. We moved into the same house, we shared meals, we learned each other's stories. Ethan showed me what it meant to prioritize family over ambition. His daughter reminded me of the sister I lost when I was 12. Slowly, without meaning to, we became a real family. Patricia wasn't buying it. That's convenient timing. Just when the board is investigating, you suddenly discover real feelings? I discovered real feelings months ago, Victoria said. I was just too scared to admit it. Why? Because everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me. My mother died when I was 8. My sister died when I was 12. My father died last year. I built walls to survive, and Ethan and his daughter knocked them down. That terrified me. It still does. The audience was silent. Patricia studied Victoria for a long moment, then turned to Ethan. And you? When did you realize this wasn't just a contract? Ethan thought about all the moments that had led to this. Victoria reading to Lily, her hand in his at the fundraiser. The kiss in the foyer. I don't know if there was one moment. It was more like 1,000 small ones. Watching her try to connect with my daughter, even though she had no idea how. Seeing her smile at something Lily said. Realizing she wasn't the cold person she pretended to be. She was just someone who'd been hurt and learned to protect herself. But you were being paid, Patricia pressed. $200,000, according to the contract that was leaked to the press. How do we know this isn't just you playing a part to keep the money? Because I offered to give it back, Ethan said. Victoria looked at him, surprised. He hadn't told her this. Last week, before the board meeting, I told Victoria I'd return every cent if it would help her case. She refused. She said I'd earned it. But the point is, I don't care about the money anymore. I care about her. And I care about my daughter who's bonded with Victoria in a way I never expected. Walking away now would hurt all three of us. Patricia turned back to Victoria. Is that true? Did he offer to return the money? Yes. And you refused? Yes. Because the money was never the point. The contract was a framework. But what grew inside it was real. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I know that's hard to believe. I know how it looks. But I'm asking people to give us a chance to prove it. Patricia leaned back, crossing her legs. Your brother claims you're manipulating everyone, including Ethan, that you're using him and will discard him the moment the year is up. What do you say to that? Victoria's expression hardened. My brother has wanted my position since the day our father named me successor. He's challenged every decision I've made, questioned every relationship I've had, and done everything in his power to undermine me. This is just his latest attempt. But he's wrong. I'm not discarding Ethan. In fact, she took Ethan's hand. When the original contract expires in 9 months, we're not getting divorced. We're staying married, for real. The audience erupted. Patricia looked stunned. Even Ethan felt his breath catch. They talked about this privately, but hearing Victoria say it publicly, in front of millions of viewers, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. You're sure about that? Patricia asked. I'm sure about him, Victoria said, looking at Ethan, which is the first time I've been sure about anything in a very long time. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, but Ethan barely heard the rest of the questions. His mind was stuck on Victoria's words. We're staying married, for real. She just committed to him in front of the entire world, with no safety net, no exit clause, no way to take it back. When they finally left the studio, a crowd of reporters swarmed them in the parking lot. Security pushed them back, but the questions came like bullets. Are you really in love? Is this another publicity stunt? What about the money? Victoria kept her head high, Ethan's hand firmly in hers, and they made it to the car without answering any of them. Inside the back seat, with the privacy screen raised and the outside world muffled, Victoria finally let herself breathe. She leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. Did I just make things better or worse? She asked. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But you were honest. That's what matters. Honest? She laughed weakly. I just confessed to contract fraud on national television. Marcus is going to use this against me. Let him try. Ethan turned to face her. You meant what you said, right? About staying married? Victoria opened her eyes, looking at him. Yes. Did you think I was lying? I thought maybe you were just saying what sounded good. I don't say things I don't mean. She took his hand. I love you, Ethan. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And I love Lily. The idea of living in that house without either of you is unbearable. So yes, I meant it, every word. Ethan kissed her, right there in the back seat of the car, with the driver pretending not to notice. When they broke apart, Victoria was smiling, a real, unguarded smile that made her look years younger. We're in so much trouble, she said. Probably, Ethan agreed, but at least we're in it together. They got home to find Lily waiting in the living room with the nanny, who'd been watching the interview with her. Lily ran to them the moment they walked through the door. I saw you on TV, she said. You told everyone you love each other. Victoria knelt down, pulling Lily into a hug. We did. Does that mean we're a real family now? Victoria looked up at Ethan, her eyes shining with tears. Yeah, kiddo, I think it does. Lily squealed, throwing her arms around Victoria's neck. Ethan joined the hug. The three of them tangled together in the foyer, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt like everything might actually be okay. But that feeling lasted less than 24 hours. The next morning, Marcus filed a lawsuit, not just against Victoria, but against Ethan too. He claimed fraud, manipulation, and breach of fiduciary duty. He demanded that Victoria be removed as CEO immediately, and that Ethan be prosecuted for knowingly participating in a scheme to defraud the company and its shareholders. The lawsuit was 50 pages long, filled with allegations and so-called evidence. Text messages between Ethan and his brother from months ago, where Ethan had mentioned being desperate. financial records showing the exact payments Victoria had made, testimony from former staff members who claimed they'd never seen Victoria and Ethan act affectionate until after the accusations started. Victoria's lawyers called an emergency meeting. They sat around the conference table in her downtown office, going through the lawsuit page by page. The lead attorney, a woman named Sharon, didn't sugarcoat it. "This is bad," she said. "The interview helped with public perception, but legally, Marcus has a case. You admitted the marriage started as a contract. That gives him ammunition." "But we also said it became real," Victoria argued, "which is subjective. A judge doesn't care about feelings, they care about facts. And the facts are that you paid Ethan $200,000 to marry you, which can be construed as fraud under the terms of your father's will." Ethan felt sick. "So what do we do?" Sharon looked at him sympathetically. "You need to prove the relationship is genuine now, regardless of how it started. That means evidence. Photos, witnesses, communication records, anything that shows you're actually in love and not just playing a part." "We have that," Victoria said. "We've been living together for months. We have photos, we have people who've seen us together, and Marcus will argue that all of it is staged." Sharon set down her pen. "The truth is, this is going to come down to testimony. You'll both have to take the stand and convince a judge that what you have is real. If you can't do that, Victoria loses the company, and Ethan could face criminal charges." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ethan looked at Victoria and saw fear in her eyes for the first time since this whole thing started. The trial was set for 6 weeks later. The media coverage was relentless. Every day brought new headlines, new speculation, new anonymous sources claiming to have inside information. Some people believed Victoria and Ethan's story. Others thought they were con artists. The internet was split down the middle, arguing in comment sections and social media threads about whether love could really grow from a contract. Ethan and Victoria tried to maintain normalcy for Lily's sake, but it was impossible. Photographers followed them everywhere. Lily's school had to increase security because reporters kept trying to get photos of her. The staff at the mansion walked on eggshells, unsure what to say or do. Through it all, Ethan and Victoria held on to each other. They spent every night talking, planning, trying to prepare for the trial. They went over their story 100 times, making sure every detail matched. They practiced answering the questions Marcus's lawyers would ask, the traps they'd try to set. But no amount of preparation could stop the anxiety. The night before the trial, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony outside his room, staring at the dark garden, trying to imagine what would happen if they lost. Would he go to jail? Would Victoria lose everything her father built? Would Lily end up in foster care while he fought the charges? Can't sleep either? He turned. Victoria stood in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Too much going through my head," Ethan said. She walked over, standing beside him at the railing. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." "You didn't drag me into anything. I made a choice. A choice you wouldn't have had to make if I'd been stronger. If I'd stood up to my father's ridiculous will from the beginning instead of trying to work around it." Ethan turned to face her. "Victoria, stop. You're not responsible for your father's decisions, and you're not responsible for mine. I chose this. I'd choose it again." "Even knowing how bad it could get?" "Even knowing." He cupped her face in his hands. "Because the alternative, not having you and Lily in my life, is worse than any lawsuit." Victoria leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I love you so much it scares me." "Good. Being scared means it matters." She opened her eyes, and in the moonlight, Ethan could see tears on her cheeks. "What if we lose?" "Then we'll deal with it. Together." "Together," she repeated, like she was trying to believe it. They stood on the balcony until dawn, holding each other, watching the sky turn from black to gray to gold. When the sun finally rose, they went inside to get ready for the fight of their lives. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the gallery, along with members of the board, employees from Laurent Industries, and people who'd just come to watch the spectacle. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with his legal team, looking confident and cold. Victoria and Ethan sat across from him with Sharon and 2 other attorneys. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Honor Castellano, known for being tough but fair. She called the court to order and the trial began. Marcus's lawyers went first. They painted a picture of Victoria as a manipulative, power-hungry CEO who'd do anything to keep control of her company. They presented the contract, the financial records, the timeline. They called witnesses who testified that Victoria had always been cold and calculating, incapable of genuine emotion. Then they went after Ethan. They showed photos of him from before the marriage, desperate, broke, willing to do anything for money. They brought in his ex-wife, who testified that Ethan had always been financially irresponsible and would absolutely marry someone for a paycheck. Ethan sat through it all, his jaw clenched, his hands fisted in his lap. Victoria reached over and took his hand, squeezing tight. He squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. When it was their turn, Sharon called Victoria to the stand first. She walked through the basics: her father's death, the terms of the will, her decision to find a husband. Then she got to the heart of it. "Why Ethan?" Sharon asked. "Out of everyone you could have chosen, why him?" "Because he was honest," Victoria said. "He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. He didn't want my money or my power. He just wanted to be a good father. That's something I could respect." "And when did your feelings change, like?" Victoria looked at Ethan. "I don't know if there was one moment. It was gradual. I'd watch him with his daughter and see the kind of parent I wish I'd had. He made me laugh. He challenged me. He saw through all my defenses and refused to let me hide. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing him as a business partner and started seeing him as the person I wanted to spend my life with." "But you were paying him," Marcus's lawyer interjected. "How can we believe any of this is real?" "Because I stopped caring about the money," Victoria said. "I would have paid 10 times as much just to keep him in my life. The contract became irrelevant the moment I fell in love with him." The lawyer tried to poke holes in her testimony, but Victoria held firm. She answered every question with the same steady conviction, never wavering, never backing down. Then it was Ethan's turn. He walked to the stand, his heart pounding, and swore to tell the truth. Sharon started with easy questions, establishing the basics. Then she got to the real stuff. "Mr. Hayes, did you marry Victoria Laurent for money?" "Initially, yes." The courtroom buzzed. Sharon held up a hand for quiet. "And now?" "Now I'm married to her because I love her, because she's the most incredible woman I've ever met, because she reads bedtime stories to my daughter and makes terrible jokes at breakfast and works herself to exhaustion because she cares so much about doing things right." Ethan's voice caught. "I married her for money. I'm staying married to her because I can't imagine my life without her." Marcus's lawyer stood up. "That's a convenient story, Mr. Hayes. But how do we know you're not just saying what you need to say to keep the money flowing?" "Because I don't care about the money anymore," Ethan said. "I'd live in a studio apartment with Victoria and Lily before I'd live in a mansion without them. The money was never the point. It was just the thing that got me through the door." "But you still took it." "Yeah, I did. Because I was desperate and I had a daughter to take care of. But if you're asking me if I'd do it again, the answer is yes. Because that contract led me to Victoria, and she's worth more than any amount of money." The lawyer tried to trip him up, asking about specific dates and conversations, trying to catch inconsistencies. But Ethan had lived this story. He didn't need to remember rehearsed answers. He just told the truth. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified on both sides. Evidence was presented and dissected. Arguments were made and refuted. Through it all, Ethan and Victoria sat together, hands clasped, facing whatever came next as a team. On the final day, the judge called for closing arguments. Marcus's lawyer argued that the marriage was a fraud, pure and simple, and that Victoria should be stripped of her position and prosecuted. Sharon argued that while the marriage had unconventional beginnings, what mattered was what it had become, a genuine relationship built on respect, trust, and love. Then Judge Castellano took a recess to deliberate. Ethan, Victoria, and their legal team went to a conference room to wait. The minutes crawled by like hours. Victoria paced. Ethan sat with his head in his hands. Sharon checked her phone compulsively. After 2 hours, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Castellano sat at the bench, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented in this case," she began, "and I've come to a decision." Ethan felt Victoria's hand tighten around his. The marriage between Victoria Laurent and Ethan Hayes began as a contractual arrangement. That much is clear. However, The question before this court is not how the marriage began, but whether it constitutes fraud under the terms of the late Mr. Laurent's will. The judge paused, looking at Victoria and Ethan. After careful consideration, I find that while the marriage's origins were unconventional, the relationship has evolved into a genuine partnership. The testimony, evidence, and observable interactions between Mr. Hayes and Ms. Laurent demonstrate authentic affection and commitment. Therefore, I rule in favor of the defendants. Ms. Laurent will retain her position as CEO of Laurent Industries, and no criminal charges will be filed against Mr. Hayes. The courtroom exploded. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Victoria collapsed against Ethan, tears streaming down her face. Ethan held her, his own eyes burning, relief flooding through him like a tidal wave. Marcus stood up, his face twisted with rage. "This is a miscarriage of justice!" Judge Castellano slammed her gavel. "Mr. Laurent, you've had your day in court. The decision stands. This case is closed." She left the bench. Security escorted Marcus out as he shouted about appeals. Victoria and Ethan stayed in their seats, holding each other, barely able to believe it was over. Sharon leaned over, grinning. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Victoria corrected, looking at Ethan. "Together." They left the courthouse through a back entrance to avoid the media circus. The drive home was quiet, both of them too drained to speak. When they pulled up to the mansion, Lily was waiting on the front steps with the nanny. She ran to them the moment they got out of the car. "Did you win?" Victoria scooped her up, spinning her around. "We won." Lily squealed, wrapping her arms around Victoria's neck. "I knew you would!" Ethan joined them, the three of them standing in the driveway, holding on to each other like they'd never let go. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the patio, looking out at the garden. The reporters were finally gone. The gates were closed. The house was quiet. "I can't believe it's over," Victoria said. "It's not over," Ethan corrected. "It's just beginning." She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the contract part is over. The trial is over. The fight with Marcus is over. Now we get to figure out what comes next. The real stuff. Building a life together. Being a family." Victoria smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "That sounds terrifying." "It does, doesn't it? But also kind of perfect." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, kind of perfect." They sat in the quiet, watching the stars come out, and for the first time in a year, they weren't performing for anyone. They were just two people who'd found each other in the messiest way possible and decided to build something real out of the wreckage. And that, Ethan thought, was worth every battle they'd fought to get here. The weeks after the trial felt like waking up from a long nightmare. The reporters gradually dispersed. The headlines moved on to other scandals. Marcus disappeared. His lawyers filed an appeal that went nowhere, and eventually he stopped making public statements altogether. Victoria heard through the corporate grapevine that he'd taken a position at a firm in London, putting an ocean between himself and the family he'd tried so hard to destroy. But winning the trial didn't magically fix everything. Ethan and Victoria still had to figure out how to actually be together without a contract dictating the terms. They had to navigate what it meant to be a real family, not just people playing roles. And that turned out to be harder than either of them expected. The first real argument happened 3 weeks after the trial. Ethan had been looking for work, something that felt like his, not just an extension of being Victoria's husband. He'd interviewed at a few companies, mid-level management positions that would give him independence and purpose. When he mentioned it over breakfast, Victoria's face had gone tight. "You don't need to work," she said. "We have more than enough money." "It's not about the money. It's about me having something of my own." "You have Lily. You have this house. You have me." Ethan set down his coffee. "And that's great. But I need to be more than someone's husband. I need to be Ethan, the guy who has his own career and his own goals. Not just the man who married a billionaire." Victoria's jaw clenched. "So being with me isn't enough?" "That's not what I'm saying." "It sounds like exactly what you're saying." They'd left the table angry, not speaking for the rest of the day. Lily had noticed, asking why everyone was so quiet. Ethan had made excuses, but he could see the worry in his daughter's eyes. That night, after Lily was asleep, Victoria found him in the library. "I'm sorry," she said from the doorway. Ethan looked up from the book he wasn't really reading. For what? For making this about me when it's about you. She crossed the room, sitting down across from him. I've spent my whole life building my career. It's how I define myself. But you're right. You need that too. I was being selfish. You weren't being selfish. You were being scared. Victoria looked at him sharply. Scared of what? That if I have my own life, you'll lose me, like you've lost everyone else. She was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. Maybe. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, maybe. Ethan moved to the couch beside her. Victoria, me having a job doesn't mean I'm leaving. It means I'm building something stable for us, for Lily. So I'm not just the guy who got lucky enough to marry you. You're not just that guy. I know, but I need to prove it to myself. He took her hand. Can you understand that? Victoria squeezed his hand. I can try. That became their new pattern. Trying. Neither of them got it right all the time. Victoria still worked too much, still struggled to turn off CEO mode when she came home. Ethan still felt out of place in her world sometimes, still wondered if he really belonged. But they kept trying, kept talking, kept choosing each other even when it was hard. Ethan eventually took a job as operations director at a mid-sized tech company. It was a step down from where he'd been before the recession, but it felt good. Honest work, reasonable hours, a team that respected him for his skills rather than his wife's bank account. Victoria struggled with it at first. She'd offer to call in favors or make introductions that could advance his career faster. Ethan always refused. This was his path, and he needed to walk it himself. Lily thrived. She'd settled into her new school, made friends, joined the soccer team. She still asked questions constantly, still drew pictures of the three of them together, still treated Victoria like she'd always been there. One afternoon, she came home with a form for parent-teacher conferences. Can both of you come? She asked, looking between Ethan and Victoria. Sarah's mom and dad both came last time, and I want you both there too. Victoria had a board meeting scheduled for that afternoon. She looked at the form, then at Lily's hopeful face, and made a decision that would have been impossible a year ago. I'll be there. Really? Really, the board can wait. Lily hugged her so hard Victoria almost fell over. Ethan watched from the doorway, feeling his throat tighten. These were the moments that mattered, not the courtrooms or the headlines or the corporate victories. Just a little girl who wanted both her parents at her school conference, and a woman who'd learned to prioritize that. 6 months after the trial, the original contract reached its expiration date. Ethan woke up that morning and stared at the calendar, remembering how terrified he'd been a year ago. How desperate. How certain he was making a mistake that would ruin everything. Victoria was already awake, sitting up in bed with her tablet, working on something. She glanced over when she noticed him staring. What are you thinking about? She asked. That today was supposed to be the day we got divorced. Victoria set the tablet aside. Do you want to get divorced? No. Good. Neither do I. She reached for his hand. But I was thinking, we should do something to mark it. The end of the contract, the beginning of everything else. Like what? Like getting married again, for real this time. No contracts, no lawyers, no business arrangements, just us, choosing each other. Ethan turned to face her fully. You want to have another wedding? I want to have our wedding. The first one was paperwork in a courthouse with Caroline as the witness. I want something that actually means something, don't you? Ethan thought about it. The first ceremony had been cold and transactional, over in 10 minutes. Victoria had worn a business suit. Ethan had worn the one decent outfit he owned. There'd been no joy in it, no celebration, just signatures on a document. Yeah, he said. I do. They planned it together, something small and intimate, just close friends and family. They chose the garden behind the mansion, the place where Lily had first convinced Victoria to pick flowers with her. Victoria insisted on hiring a planner, but let Ethan have input on every detail. They argued about the music, compromised on the menu, and both agreed that Lily should be the flower girl. Ethan's brother Jonathan flew in from Chicago. They hadn't spoken much since Ethan had moved into the mansion. Jonathan had been skeptical about the whole arrangement, worried Ethan was getting in over his head. But when he arrived and saw how happy Ethan looked, how natural he and Victoria were together, his skepticism melted away. You really love her, Jonathan said the night before the wedding. They were sitting on the patio drinking beer while Victoria and Lily finalized the flower arrangements inside. Yeah, I really do. And she loves you? She does. Jonathan shook his head, smiling. Man, when you first told me you were marrying a billionaire CEO you'd just met, I thought you'd lost your mind, but I was wrong. You found something real. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth having ever is. Jonathan clinked his bottle against Ethan's. I'm happy for you, really. The wedding day was perfect in all the ways that mattered, which is to say it was chaotic and imperfect and completely genuine. The weather forecast had promised sunshine, but rain rolled in an hour before the ceremony. They had to move everything into the conservatory, cramming chairs between plants and rearranging the decorations. Victoria stressed about the logistics while Ethan tried to calm her down. Lily ran around in her flower girl dress, already getting it dirty before the ceremony even started. But when the music started and Victoria walked down the makeshift aisle in a simple white dress, everything else fell away. She wasn't the ice-cold CEO anymore. She was just Victoria, smiling through tears, walking toward the man she loved. Ethan met her halfway, breaking protocol, unable to wait. They'd written their own vows. Victoria went first, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Ethan, a year ago I hired you to play a part, to be my husband on paper so I could keep my company. I thought I could control everything, keep my emotions separate, and walk away when it was over. But you didn't let me do that. You saw through every wall I built. You challenged me to be better. You reminded me that life is about more than success and power. And your daughter showed me that love isn't a weakness. It's the only thing that actually matters. I'm standing here today not because of a contract, but because I choose you. I choose this family. I choose love, even though it terrifies me. I promise to keep choosing it every day for the rest of my life. Ethan's throat was tight, but he managed to speak his own vows. Victoria, when we met, I was broken. I'd lost everything, and I was about to lose my daughter. You offered me a deal that seemed too good to be true, and for a long time I kept waiting for the catch. But the catch turned out to be falling in love with someone I never expected. You're complicated and stubborn, and you work too much. But you're also kind and generous, and you've given Lily and me a home. Not just a house, but a real home. You taught me that starting over isn't failure, it's courage. And you showed me that family isn't always about biology. It's about showing up, about trying, about choosing each other even when it's hard. I promise to keep showing up for you, for as long as you'll have me. The officiant pronounced them married. Ethan kissed Victoria like it was the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. Lily cheered, the small crowd of guests applauded. And in that moment, standing in the conservatory while rain drummed against the glass roof, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. The reception was casual, just dinner and dancing in the main house. Victoria's staff had outdone themselves with the food, and someone had set up a sound system in the ballroom. Lily dragged both Ethan and Victoria onto the dance floor, insisting they all dance together. Victoria, who'd spent years attending formal galas, looked awkward trying to dance to pop music with a 6-year-old, but she tried, laughing when Lily corrected her moves, and Ethan fell in love with her all over again. Later, when Lily was asleep upstairs and most of the guests had left, Ethan and Victoria stood on the balcony of their bedroom, looking out at the garden where they'd first started becoming a real family. I can't believe we pulled this off, Victoria said. What, the wedding? All of it, the trial, the relationship, making this work. A year ago, I thought this was just a business transaction. Now I can't imagine my life without you. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. You know what's funny? I spent so much time being terrified of losing Lily that I forgot to think about what I might gain. You, this family, a second chance at actually being happy. Victoria leaned back against him. Do you think we would have found each other if we hadn't been desperate? If the circumstances had been different? I don't know. Maybe not. Our worlds don't really overlap. So we got lucky? Or the universe knew what it was doing? Ethan turned her to face him. Either way, I'm glad we're here. Me too. Victoria kissed him softly. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was impossible. You're still impossible, she laughed. Fair point. They stood together in the quiet, and Ethan thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The desperation, the contract, the lies, the trial. All of it had been necessary somehow. All of it had led here. 3 months after the wedding, Victoria came home with news. She walked into the living room where Ethan and Lily were building a blanket fort, her expression unreadable. "I need to talk to you," she said to Ethan. Lily looked up. "Are you in trouble, Daddy?" "I don't think so," Ethan said, though Victoria's tone made him nervous. "Can you keep building? I'll be right back." They went into the study. Victoria closed the door, then turned to face him with an expression he couldn't read. "I'm pregnant," she said. Ethan's mind went blank. "What?" "I'm pregnant, about 8 weeks. I took 3 tests to be sure." She was studying his face carefully. "Say something." Ethan sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "I wasn't expecting that." "Neither was I. We've been careful, but apparently not careful enough." Victoria sat down across from him. "I know this isn't what we planned. I know it's fast, but I want to keep it, if you're okay with that." Ethan looked at her. This woman who'd been so terrified of love a year ago, now telling him she wanted to have his child. "Are you kidding?" "Of course I'm okay with that." Victoria's shoulders sagged with relief. "Really? Really?" Ethan moved to her chair, kneeling in front of her. "Victoria, you've given me everything. A home, a family, a second chance. Having a baby with you isn't scary. It's perfect." She started crying, something she still did rarely and only when overwhelmed. "I'm terrified I'm going to be a terrible mother." "You're already a great mother to Lily." "That's different. I learned how to be there for her gradually. A baby is... I don't know how to be responsible for something so small and helpless." "Then we'll figure it out together, like we figured out everything else." He put his hand on her stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. "We're going to be okay." Victoria covered his hand with hers. "Promise?" "I promise." They told Lily that night. She was ecstatic, immediately launching into plans for how she'd teach the baby everything she knew, how she'd be the best big sister ever, how they should name the baby after her favorite character from a book series she was reading. Victoria and Ethan let her ramble, both of them smiling at her enthusiasm. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Victoria had terrible morning sickness for the first trimester, and she hated feeling out of control of her own body. She tried to keep working at her normal pace, but Ethan and her assistant Caroline eventually staged an intervention, forcing her to delegate more and actually rest. Victoria resisted at first, but eventually gave in when she realized she was too exhausted to fight. Ethan cut back his hours at work, taking on more of the household responsibilities. He cooked dinners, helped Lily with homework, and made sure Victoria actually ate instead of just working through meals. It was a reversal of their early dynamic, and Victoria struggled with it. She wasn't used to being taken care of, but slowly she learned to accept help, to lean on Ethan when she needed to admit when she was overwhelmed instead of pretending she had everything under control. They found out they were having a girl. Victoria cried in the ultrasound room, and when Ethan asked why, she said, "Because I get to give her everything I never had. A mother who's present, a father who's involved, a family that doesn't fall apart." "Emma," Ethan said suddenly. Victoria looked at him. "What?" "We should name her Emma, after your sister." Victoria's face crumpled. She nodded, unable to speak, and Ethan held her while she cried in the examining room, mourning the sister she'd lost while celebrating the daughter she was about to have. Emma Laurent Hayes was born on a Tuesday morning in October, 7 pounds and 3 ounces of screaming, wrinkly perfection. Victoria held her for the first time and looked at Ethan with an expression of pure wonder. "We made this," she said, like she couldn't quite believe it. "We did." Lily met her new sister an hour later, standing on tiptoes to peek into the bassinet. "She's so tiny," she whispered. "Can I hold her?" Victoria helped position Emma in Lily's arms, hovering anxiously, but Lily was careful and gentle. "Hi, Emma," she said softly. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything." Ethan watched his 2 daughters, one by blood, one by choice, and his wife, who'd transformed from a cold CEO into this warm, fierce mother. He thought about the man he'd been a year and a half ago, standing in the rain outside the courthouse, convinced his life was over. He'd been so wrong. His life hadn't ended that day. It had been waiting to begin. The first few months with a newborn were brutal. Emma had colic and cried for hours every night. Victoria was exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. Ethan took the night shifts when he could, but they were both zombies. The mansion that had once felt enormous now felt cramped with baby equipment everywhere. They argued about feeding schedules and sleep training and whether they should hire a night nanny, but they also had moments of startling beauty. Emma's first smile aimed at Victoria while she was singing an off-key lullaby, Lily reading to her baby sister, using different voices for each character. The four of them on the couch on a Sunday morning, still in pajamas, with nowhere to be and nothing to do except be together. Victoria went back to work part-time when Emma was 3 months old. She'd arranged to work from home most days, with Caroline handling the office. It wasn't easy, balancing conference calls with diaper changes, trying to review contracts while Emma screamed in the background. But Victoria made it work. She'd learned that she didn't have to choose between career and family. She could have both, even if that meant neither one got 100% of her attention. Ethan's career was going well too. He'd been promoted to senior director, managing a larger team. His colleagues respected him, and he'd made real friends at the office. People who knew him as Ethan the operations guy, not Ethan the billionaire's husband. It felt good to have an identity separate from Victoria, even though he loved being her husband. Lily turned 8. They threw her a birthday party in the garden, inviting her entire soccer team and half her class. Victoria had been worried about managing that many kids, but Ethan reminded her that they had staff for a reason. The party was chaos, children running everywhere, cake smashed into the grass, someone breaking a vase in the conservatory. But Lily had the time of her life, and that was what mattered. That night, after the guests left and Lily was in bed, Victoria and Ethan cleaned up the remaining mess. Emma was asleep in the baby monitor on Victoria's hip. They worked in comfortable silence, throwing away paper plates and picking up abandoned toys. "I've been thinking," Victoria said as she tied off a trash bag. "About what?" "About how different my life is now compared to 2 years ago. I used to work until midnight every night. I ate dinner at my desk. I didn't have friends, just business associates. I was successful, but I was miserable. I just didn't know it." Ethan stopped what he was doing. "And now? Now I'm still successful, but I'm also happy. I have you, I have Lily, I have Emma. I have a life outside of the office." She looked at him. "You did that. You and Lily. You broke through all my defenses and reminded me that there's more to life than corporate victories." "You did that yourself," Ethan said. "We just gave you a reason to try." Victoria walked over to him, standing on her toes to kiss him. "Thank you. For everything. For staying when it got hard. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For giving me this family. Thank you for letting me in," Ethan said. "For taking a chance on a desperate single dad standing in the rain." They finished cleaning up, then sat on the patio with glasses of wine, watching the stars come out. The baby monitor crackled occasionally with Emma's sleeping sounds. Inside, Lily was dreaming about her birthday party. The house was quiet and full at the same time. "Do you ever think about how this all started?" Ethan asked. "The contract, the deal, all the pretending?" "Sometimes. It feels like another lifetime." "Do you regret any of it?" Victoria thought about that. "I regret how scared I was, how much time I wasted trying to keep everyone at arm's length. But I don't regret the contract. It brought you into my life. It forced me to confront everything I'd been avoiding, so no, I don't regret it." "Me neither." Ethan reached for her hand, even though it was insane. "Completely insane," Victoria agreed. "But it worked." They sat in the quiet, holding hands, and Ethan realized something profound. Love wasn't always a lightning bolt or a fairy tale. Sometimes it was a business transaction that slowly transformed into something real. Sometimes it was two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment and decided to be brave together. Sometimes it was messy and complicated and built on a foundation that made no sense to anyone else. But that didn't make it less real. It just made it theirs. Years passed. Lily grew into a confident, passionate teenager who wanted to be a lawyer so she could help kids like her dad had been helped. Emma grew into a curious, talkative toddler who asked even more questions than Lily had at that age. Victoria continued running Laurent Industries, but on her own terms, with boundaries that protected her family time. Ethan built a successful career, eventually becoming VP of operations at his company. They had fights, they had struggles. Raising two daughters while managing two careers was never easy, but they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. On their 5th wedding anniversary, the real one, not the contract one, Victoria gave Ethan a gift. It was a framed photo from their first wedding, the courthouse ceremony with Caroline as the witness. Victoria looked stern in her business suit. Ethan looked terrified. Neither of them was smiling. Below it, she'd placed a photo from their second wedding, both of them smiling, holding hands, surrounded by flowers and joy. The contrast was stark. "I want to remember where we started," Victoria said, "so we never forget how far we've come." Ethan hung it in the study, where they'd see it every day. A reminder that the best things in life often start in the most unlikely ways. Sometimes late at night, when both girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Victoria would find Ethan on the balcony, looking out at the garden. She'd join him, and they'd stand together in the darkness, not needing to say anything. They'd learned each other's silences, each other's fears, each other's hopes. They'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who was willing to grow with you. Someone who saw your worst parts and chose to stay anyway. Someone who made you brave enough to try. Victoria had learned that success wasn't just about corporate victories. It was about building a life that felt full, not just productive. It was about being present for the people you loved, even when work was calling. It was about letting yourself be vulnerable and trusting that you wouldn't be destroyed. Ethan had learned that needing help wasn't weakness, that accepting love didn't make you less of a man or less of a father, that sometimes the worst moments in life led to the best transformations, that being broken didn't mean you couldn't be whole again. And Lily, beautiful, perceptive Lily, had learned that families came in all shapes, that love didn't require biology, that the people who showed up mattered more than the people who shared your DNA. She'd watched her father go from desperate to hopeful, watched Victoria go from cold to warm, and learned that people could change when they had a reason to. The thing nobody tells you about real love is that it's not a destination. It's not something you achieve and then coast on forever. It's a choice you make every single day. Some days that choice is easy. Some days it's the hardest thing you've ever done. But if you keep choosing it, if you keep showing up, eventually you build something that can weather anything. Ethan and Victoria built that, not because they were perfect people or because they had a fairy tale romance. They built it because they were two imperfect people who decided that what they had was worth fighting for. They built it in courtrooms and boardrooms and kitchens and bedrooms. They built it through arguments and apologies and compromises and celebrations. They built it one day at a time, one choice at a time, until they looked around and realized they'd created something extraordinary. A family. Not the family either of them had expected or planned for, but the family they chose. And that, in the end, made all the difference. Because chosen family isn't about obligation or expectation. It's about recognition, about finding the people who see you, really see you, and deciding to build a life with them. It's about creating your own definition of what family means, rather than accepting someone else's. That's what Ethan and Victoria learned. That's what they taught their daughters. That's what they lived every single day. And when people asked how they made it work, how a billionaire CEO and a desperate single father built a real marriage from a business contract, they always gave the same answer. They chose each other, not once, but every day. Through the doubts and the scandals and the exhaustion and the joy, they kept choosing each other, kept showing up, kept trying. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.